Policymakers, industry leaders and experts are charting the course for Ghana's economic future. What are the key takeaways so far and what should businesses expect? Stay tuned with us for the insight and analysis. Also coming up, as Finance Minister Dr. Cassiel Ato-Forson readies to present 2025 budget statement in Parliament on March 11, what should businesses and investors? The Accra International Conference Centre is currently hosting a pivotal two-day national economic dialogue which began today. This significant event, initiated by President John Dramani Mahama, aims to address Ghana's pressing economic challenges and forge a path towards sustainable growth. The dialogue has drawn a diverse group of participants, including key stakeholders from the private sector, academia, public policy institutions and civil society organizations. President Mahama's vision for this dialogue is to create a platform for collaborative solutions, emphasizing the importance of citizen engagement in shaping the nation's economic future. The outcome of this forum are expected to lay the groundwork for economic revitalization and improved living conditions for all Ghanaians. The dialogue is scheduled to conclude tomorrow, March 4, with a set of clear commitments and milestones aimed at building a resilient and transformative economy. Now, we'll walk you through the 6 thematic areas of this national dialogue. Now, on top on the list is achieving sustainable macroeconomic stability. We know how crucial this conversation has been over the last couple of years with issues with regards to inflation, the depreciation of the cedi and the likes. Also, promoting economic transformation. Next, advancing infrastructure development, implementing structural reforms, ensuring private sector-led growth, restoring good governance, and combating corruption. So these 6 thematic areas are going to be central as part of the two-day conversation at the National Economic Dialogue currently underway at the Accra International Conference Centre in Accra. But then President John Mahama has indicated that fiscal responsibility must be the bedrock of the economy. His comment highlights the importance of sound financial management for sustainable economic growth. Speaking at the National Economic Dialogue, President Mahama noted that prioritizing responsible spending, effective revenue collection and prudent debt management are crucial to revamping the economy.
I know that the road to economic recovery will be challenging, but we must not relent in our quest to rebuild the Ghana we all want for the sake of our children and our children's children. We owe it to ourselves, our children, and our country to rebuild an economy that is resilient, that is sustainable and capable of delivering real opportunities for every citizen. My priority as president is to restore macroeconomic stability. We must enforce responsible public financial management and ensure fiscal discipline at all levels of government while working to reduce hardships for our people. Under my leadership, the Bank of Ghana's independence will be safeguarded to implement prudent monetary policies that curb inflation, that stabilize our currency and rebuilds our foreign reserves. We must never again allow reckless borrowing and excessive government spending to undermine our progress. Fiscal responsibility must become the bedrock of our national development strategy. Every cedi spent must deliver tangible value to the Ghanaian people. We must review our laws to eliminate excessive waste in the procurement of government supplies and projects. Single-source procurement must be the rare exception rather than the norm. We must also subject government projects above a certain threshold to value for money audits. And just this morning, I was reviewing some of the procurement reports. And there was this procurement for poultry farmers, 10,000 units of something. And it was single source. The reason for single source was urgency. And one company was giving the contract to supply 10,000 units of whatever it was. The supplier and the person who assembles it was not allowed to bid. And so the company who that won it went to the supplier, bought the items for 4,500 and came and sold them for 6,600 to government and walked away with 21 million cedis.
So that was President John Mahama speaking earlier today at the National Economic Dialogue, raising some critical concerns with the issue of sole sourcing in the country, which he believes should be the last resort going forward. We'll still bring you some more highlights from the event, starting off with the Finance Minister, Dr. Cassiel Ato Forson, who has warned that Ghana will not attain middle-income status until after 2050 unless comprehensive economic reforms are implemented immediately. Speaking at the ongoing National Economic Dialogue in Accra, Dr. Forson emphasized that with the right policies and holistic implementation, Ghana could reach this milestone by 2038. The dialogue is being held as part of President John Mahama's 120-day social contract, with Ghanaians focusing on strategies to revamp the economy.
We've adjusted for moderate reforms, and we have also adjusted for ambitious reforms. The moderate reforms will largely mean that we will have to quickly bring on stream the Pecan field, and that will adjust from where we are and improve the growth trend. Whereas ambitious reforms will mean we'll have to do a lot more than adjusting from the Pecan oil fields. Without comprehensive reforms, unfortunately, Ghana will only achieve upper middle income status after the year 2050. And we cannot wait till the year 2050 before we become an upper middle income country. There's an urgent need for comprehensive policies and institutional reforms that enhance productivity, improve the quality of infrastructures, services, and elevate human capital and workforce skills. These reforms have the potential of transforming Ghana within a generation, tripling its per capita income by the year 2050. There is the need to reorient fiscal policy to support the growth and structural transformation. Unfortunately, looking at where we are going, if nothing is done, Ghana will only become an upper middle income country in the year 2050. With moderate reforms, we'll be able to become an upper middle income country in the year 2042. But if we are to do well and introduce very ambitious reforms, Ghana will indeed become an upper middle income country before the year 2038.
So that was Cassiel Ato Forson, Finance Minister, basically talking about the reforms that the country needs to undergo if we want to be able to make significant growth and improve our status as an economy. After the program, we interacted with various industry players on what they make of this particular National Economic Dialogue and what the expectations are from the outcomes going forward. We engaged Dr. Humphrey Yim Dake, the president of the Association of Ghana Industries, AGI. We spoke to Dr. Joseph Obeng, president of the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, GUTA, and we also spoke to Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, COPEC, Duncan Amwa. This is what they had to say about the currently ongoing National Economic Dialogue. What's your take from the speeches so far?
From the speeches, they are inspiring. From the intent, they are noble. And it comes to execution. So the roadmap to execution is what we're traversing to be sure that we can have equal minds. And for that cause, the president's speech about the mindset is critical for such a revolutionary engagement and resetting an economy of a number of decades of decadence, tax difficulties, coming for tax reforms, policy reforms, structural reforms. You need a mindset, and therefore the critical issue in the room now is the mindset, galvanizing the mindset of the Ghanaians. Because like mentioned by the finance minister, there'll be some rough patches. And therefore, if you do not get a mindset to be in addendum with the finance minister and the president, there'll be challenges. So it's a noble call to get a mindset in tune with the agenda, and we are all for it.
For you as Eguta, I'm sure you heard the president also reiterated his commitment to ensuring the economy bounces back. What do you make of this?
That's the surest way to go. We cannot dwell in the past if it was not good. So it means that we have to go forward. And so we are in a new threshold that the president want to lead us all, the sector players and all, to come and brainstorm and build the necessary consensus that will help me formulate the needed policies that will help stabilize the local currency. How our local currency will be strengthened, how inflation will be solved, how the macroeconomic indicators will all get better. And that's why we are gathered here to prefer the needed solutions. For me, how to deal with these things is what I'm so looking for, rather than why. The whys have been talked about all this time. For now, we have to think about how we can formulate tangible policies and that can be implemented to help the cause of businesses.
All right. Now, back to you, AJ. You heard the finance minister speak about the fact that the energy sector debt accounts for about 2% of the GDP. And he also raised issues about the fact that he didn't think it was prudent to also compensate ECG by increasing tariffs to make up for their losses. I'm sure that was good news for you.
Of course, he's seeking to drive efficiency. And then I keep telling you, it's the mindset. Once you send that signal strongly to PURC and all the stakeholders in the value chain, and they realize that the efficiency will come back to haunt them, they will scale up. So therefore, it calls about efficiency, and we are in tandem with the finance minister not to compensate inefficiency with tariff increase. Because largely, it will come back to my members finding the cash to pay for those tariff increments. So we want to drive efficiency. That's why we call for the PSP. So the PSP is laudable. We need to formulate it such that it will be suitable to the business community and the other consuming partners.
Some have said that this dialogue could end up being just a talk shop at the end of the day. For you as industry, how much of a difference do you think this dialogue has, and what potential would they have in revolutionizing the economy?
Well, we'll have to think positively. This is a president who has a new mandate, and that is his vision, and we will support his cause to execute the vision. So it is in the execution that makes a difference. The intents are clear, the rollout plan are clear. How do we execute it? As he collects data and collects all ideas, let's get back to how we can execute this for our common good. Because I believe the position as tabled and the data as enumerated resonates with us all, and therefore we should put our hands on the wheel and seek to do that which is needful for our country in the execution of this agenda.
So I'll pick your thoughts on the fact that some people think that this whole dialogue could just be a talk shop and nothing really would come out of it. What do you make of that?
No, you see, the president is inspiring a lot of hope, and then his assurances, he's ready to redeem them, because it's not just a talk show, as I can deduce from the government and the presidency. So I believe we have to have some positive mindset here, and then all of us should take this as an opportunity to give the government a pinch whenever he's going against these things that we have brought. It shouldn't be that we do this and go and sleep. That we should use this and use it as a reminder to government. So the onus lies on us. If this thing is going to be implemented or otherwise, we have to give it a push. And the onus lies on the stakeholders like our very selves, AGI, and other sector players, to make sure that we give it the necessary push that it deserves, so that government will account for this particular thing that we are doing now.
What do you make of this economic dialogue, and how do you think it can help address the pertinent issues in the energy and petroleum sector?
Economic is what turns a country. Everything rises and sets with the economy. And so when you hear a dialogue of this magnitude, it is incumbent on you to also make your voices count, especially the bits about the economy that we are not happy with, the bits that we think can improve, and the bits that should be, looked at critically. So we're here to partake in this economic dialogue. One, we are not too happy with the way the energy sector has run. We are not happy with the fluctuations in fuel prices. You wake up, it's gone down, it's gone up, and sometimes it can go up, and then when it has to come down, it comes down by a few cents. There must be a solution to all of these things, and so when the opportunity presents itself, we will make our views known and counted. And we are happy that, of course, a cross-section of the Ghanaian, from professionals to academia to civil society to parliamentarians to everybody, also are here to partake in this dialogue. But the bits we've been exposed to here today are things that we can't push under the carpet. So we will need to work out a certain sustainable modality towards ridding the energy sector particularly of the numerous leakages that leads to unsustainable debts that you and I would eventually have to pay for. Per presentations seen so far, ECG is grossly inefficient and also simply opaque in their dealings. I was, personally upset when just 3 days ago you woke up to the Northern Electricity Development Corporation, a warehouse containing transformers and everything blown up. These things would take the taxpayers' money to go back to buy. And so once we allow some of these things to happen, we are simply deferring a debt that will be paid for by us or the future generations. And some of these things, I think as a country, we need to pay critical attention to them. It cannot also continue that ECG, out of what the IPPs would supply, is only able to account for 65%. And even of the 65% of what they are able to collect, they would still now take about 35% of that collection done and spend it on themselves, whilst the IPPs are not paid. So you wake up, IPPs are drumming war drums, indicating they want to terminate or shut down. And then when they do, it is you and I, the poor, who are simply going to suffer because somebody sat at ECG and did very inefficient things or corrupt, fraudulent stuff. Lastly, we are also interested in ensuring that the kind of contracts that persist within the energy stream, we look at them again. You take power, for instance, and I have personally witnessed the situation where when I am buying a street light bulb, I'm paying about 450 to 500 Ghana for 1 unit. Yet, when you see some contracts from the ministry sometimes, the government is paying as much as 1,600, 1,500 for something that even the open market is delivering around 450, 500. Meanwhile, the government is buying in hundreds of thousands of units. So you wonder how some of these things are done, and then we leave the debt, and then we come back to the people and say, let's enhance or increase tariffs. We are opposed to any attempts to add any pressure whatsoever on any Ghanaian in the name of additional tariffs. We will be happy to see a total cleanup of the system where you block the leakages, you block the opacity of, contracts, and then you are able to ring fence whatever collections you do to be able to pay for the debt that has been accumulated. When you get to that point and you need to have a discussion on the numbers with the consumer, I think that we'll all be open to it as to what is sustainable, what is feasible, what is good. If we get to that point and we need to enhance tariff, we will be doing so bearing in mind the fact that we are not just increasing tariffs, but we are being sustainable. At present, any attempt to increase will simply be down to a leaking basket. Let's increase the volume of water we are picking from the tap, it will still not get full. It will still run into losses because the bad practices, we've not been able to deal with them. And I am hopeful that the new government will pay closer attention to these bad practices and stem them.
So you heard the industry basically reacting to the National Economic Dialogue, sharing their expectations and optimism, the fact that this dialogue could set the tone for what the current government has described as resetting the economy. You've heard also from the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, where they are also saying that it is important that all the loopholes within the economy and the leakages are addressed to ensure that whatever new policies or systems are introduced will actually work and not be inhibited or set back by these various inefficiencies in the economy. We spoke also extensively with economist Dr. Theo Acheampong on what he thinks is the way forward, especially with this National Economic Dialogue. And this is what he had to say. What did you make of the entire dialogue?
I think it's a very good dialogue, good conversations. For me, really the idea of bringing all stakeholders around the table, from government to civil society to development partners to academics and researchers like myself, to discuss the range of issues that bedevil this Ghanaian economy is something that is commendable and definitely positive. Of course, people have raised issues that we've seen similar things in the past with Senchi and others, and not much came out of it. But I think that even if we didn't see much on that, it doesn't mean we should stop trying and be pushing for the much needed reforms. The economy, as we speak currently, is still bedeviled by serious challenges. We've seen in the presentations, a lot of our state-owned enterprises losing or hemorrhaging a lot of money. We've seen the fact that, we need to be growing at about 6-7% a year if we want to actually become upper middle income by 2050. We've also seen that, it's not just enough to be talking growth. It has to structurally transform the economy and then impact livelihoods, because the data shows that inequality and poverty has actually been on the rise in the last 10, 15 years, despite the economy growing and despite some of the challenges that we're seeing. And that is something that is a cause for concern for many of us. So how you address that becomes important. And then I think maybe also the whole conversation about how do we support the private sector to actually deliver on the jobs and the transformation agenda. They are having to deal with serious issues of the tax environment being choking. They are bringing goods in and having to pay huge amounts of duties at the ports. They go to the bank to try and borrow, and the bank is charging 30%, right? I mean, how do you break even in such a context? So all of these multifaceted issues, but all connected to the bigger agenda of transformation, becomes extremely important. And having people around the room to not just discuss, but have some action items that we can take and hold the government to account on, that becomes really, really critical.
Some have also asked that how different really is what the outcome of this dialogue going to be compared to the work that the NDPC, for instance, has been doing over the years?
I think the NDPC works more on the medium to long-term plans. In fact, the NDPC has to produce a document now with the new government called the Coordinated Plan of Social Action and Development Policy. So it's basically the medium-term plan for the country from 2025 to, I think, 2028 or 2029. The discussions here definitely, I expect, will feed into those NDPC conversations and the document. But this is a much broader remit than what the NDPC would ordinarily have to do. But also the fact that we are still in a crisis mode, and you need to gather your best brains around the table to find solutions. My hope, expectation is that we actually would carry the reforms through to the end, and it just doesn't become, another talk shop, and that's the concern a lot of people have.
Let's talk about the energy sector. You heard the finance minister there touch on how critical things have become with the energy sector and how much it's affecting, accounting for our GDP in terms of the expense, and also the fact that we shouldn't be compensating the ECG by increasing tariffs. What do you make of this?
No, he's absolutely right. I mean, look at the tariff structure. Look at ECG is losing what? For every 1 CD of power they buy, they're losing about 40 pesos of that. And then within the tariff structure, there's a line item called the distribution wheeling charge, or distribution service charge, one of them, which actually is meant to go and address some of these inefficiencies. We've also seen the tariffs adjusted to reflect economic fundamentals. What I mean by that is you're buying electricity in dollars and you're selling in cedis. And so to the extent that the CD continues to depreciate, then necessarily tariffs would always have to go up. But that's just one dimension of the problem. The other dimension is that deep ECG is hugely inefficient. The losses have actually increased year on year over the last couple of years. And so something radical has to be done. And the proposal not to just increase tariffs, and further deepen the inefficiencies is welcome. I think fundamentally the ECG has to undergo some form of privatization or private ownership, to institute or allow them to be a bit more efficient. They've become too big to handle, and it's posing systemic problems to the broader economy. Same with Cocoa Board, as well. But the energy sector, if you don't address it, is going to drag all of us back, and the growth agenda we're talking about would not be met. I think also related to that is the point that, okay, we need to increase the electricity generation capacity of the country, right? And how best to do that becomes, for example, how do we use renewable auctions to bring more distributed solar onto the grid to balance the supply. So there are a few things that would have to be done. It's not going to be overnight. We need to give ourselves maybe about a year and a half to see those reforms pass through. But fundamentally for ECG, part of the root and stem solution has to be some form of privatization.
We know that the PRC regularly adjusts tariffs to make up for the currency losses conversation. And then also, on the top of that too, do you think that privatization of ECG alone is enough to address the problem or with ECG?
Privatization will help. It's not going to be fully. So like I said, the tariff itself, you're buying in dollar and selling in CD. So to the extent that the exchange rate is a big component of the price makeup, if we don't address the bigger structural issues with the economy and ensure that the CD is stable, tariffs would always have to, to go up. But then that's one part of the problem. The other part which we're discussing is, even if let's assume that we did not have issues with tariff and that the tariffs were going up normally in line with the exchange rate and the underlying economic fundamentals like inflation, you will still have a problem at ECG because they're collecting the money, not paying into the cash waterfall. There's huge overheads and losses there that need to be addressed. Back in 2013, the World Bank did a report on Ghana's power sector, and the issues that were raised back then, which we should have resolved 12 years down the line, are still bedeviling ECG.
All right. Now, talking about the currency, because it's, of course, the state of the currency is crucial to the energy sector, like you have alluded to. Now, the issue of Cocoa Board, we know that Cocoa Board has been, the sale of cocoa has played an instrumental role in solidifying the currency. From where we stand now, things look very gloomy for the cocoa industry. How do we begin to resolve this?
It's a hydra-headed problem. We have to improve the productivity of the cocoa farmers or the youths themselves, right? A number of studies that have been done, one which I happen to have partook in 2 years ago, it was very clear that a number of the trees are diseased, they're dying, the farmers are old, and then on top of that you have the issue of galamsey, where the young people don't want to go into cocoa farming, they would rather prefer to sell the farm and dig, right, for gold on on the soil. So productivity is a big issue that needs to be addressed. But there are also other issues like Cocoa Board itself, with how they undertake their liquidity management, credit risk management, and how we even sell the beans. You know, the beans are forward sold. So if the prices go up, as we've seen in the last few years, you don't benefit from the upside. So there's a conversation that needs to be had on what sort of percentages do we hedge versus which ones do we put on the spot market. But we fundamentally have to grow the volumes of cocoa in the sector, and a lot of incentives are needed to make sure that that happens.
Do you think it's about time we reviewed how we went about the sale of the cocoa? Because if you look at the trajectory over the last couple of years, it appears to be rising. Should we try and venture to some extent to the spot market?
I think you need a combination of both. So you need a combination of spot and, you know, the forward sale. The optimal mix is something that can be discussed or subject to, you know, like empirical. But the data and what we've seen over the last few years clearly is that when prices are around $10,000, $12,000 a ton, and you've sold yours for $2,900, $3,000, you're losing value. So definitely a conversation needs to be had around how you optimize the sales in a way that brings more value for Ghanaian farmers.
We've seen that from the finance minister's presentation, state-owned enterprises are also becoming a major challenge, with majority of them running losses, including Cocoa Board, which he says the profits that they declared are actually because they have not started paying some of their debts. How do we begin to resolve this issue of SOEs? Because now we need to be focusing on raising revenue domestically.
Yeah, the SOE problem is not even just revenue problem. The thing is that it's a political economy thing, and let me explain. We often have a lot of square pegs in round holes, where the people you are appointing to go and run these very sensitive state enterprises that are meant to generate revenue and resources for the country, they're just not up to the task, right? Because you are rewarding people that contributed to the campaign, right, of the party. And this is one of the big elephants in the room that we all don't want to talk about, not just the CEOs, but even the board members, right? So until we realize that you actually need a competent state, and a competent state that brings the best of the human capital to run these organizations, and you give them the room, let them sign KPIs, let them sign contracts that you can hold them up to it, we probably will be dancing around the issues. Because you look at other SOEs, whether it's in energy or other sectors, look at the Saudi Aramcos of this world, the ADNOCs of this world, and you see that they are run with a competent mindset that we need to make a return for the state, and the caliber of appointees that run these are some of the best that you'll find anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be a case in our circumstance, where many of the people we are appointing to these state-owned enterprises are, you know, not just up to the task, and that's something we need to work on.
So you heard the economist Dr. Theo Acheampong sharing his thoughts on the National Economic Dialogue and critical areas of the economy that he believes must be addressed. He spoke about the fact that the critical sectors of the economy have to be given a push so that they can trickle down and impact on the average Ghanaian's livelihood. He emphasized the fact that ECG privatization is the way to go. However, it is not the only approach if we want to improve upon this current situation of the utility service provider. He emphasizes the fact that so long as ECG continues to buy power in dollars and sell in cedis, there will always be challenges with the currency there, and there has to be a concerted effort to strengthen the cedi to address the revenue losses there with the depreciation of the cedi. He spoke also about Cocoa Board and the fact that we need to relook the way Cocoa Board goes about the sale of its products, of the cocoa beans, especially when the international market is looking so well. It's looking good, and we've seen significant rise in the price of cocoa. So he's spoken about the need for us to plug into that spot market and also take advantage of that and make some good windfalls for the country's from the country's cocoa sector. Just some quick messages on Facebook that have come in. Papa Ankoma says Ghana will work again. Julie Belinda Obri says under NDC government, Ghana will work again. Tandari says you have a very long way to bleed. Keep it up. And a number of messages also coming up. We'll go over to Zoom later after this break and speak to the CEO of the Association of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mark Bedu Abuaje, and also pick his thoughts on the National Economic Dialogue, and then segue into our next topic, which is expectations ahead of this year's budget presentation. We know how crucial and eager industry and everybody alike is to hear what the government's policy direction is going to be, and if also it will stick to its word and promise to scrap some taxes that were introduced by the SWL government. This is Business Focus. I am Michael Obudu. Stay with us. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversations. Welcome back. This is Business Focus. We know in just about a week and a day, the government will be presenting its budget for 2025. And everybody is keen to know what the nitty-gritties are and what the key sectors the government will be focusing on. And of course, the big one, if it will go ahead to scrap the various taxes that it said it would, from the e-levy to the betting tax and the likes. And we know also that at this point, raising revenue domestically is one or about the only source of revenue government has right now, as it has been cut off from the international market due to the junk status of our bonds. And even the IMF has warned against returning to the international market at the moment because, of course, we are not going to be able to secure very good deals because of the status of our bonds. But we have joining us via Zoom Mark Bedu Abuaje with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce and Industry to pick his thoughts on the budget presentation. But Mark, before you go into it, there's been a lot of positive reception to the National Economic Dialogue. I don't know if GNCCI shares in that posturing.
No, we do actually. We think that it's a good start. We believe that most of the challenges that we are having now, they are domestic, they are local. So we should have homegrown solutions or policies to address them. Obviously, if the issue of corruption, we don't need anybody from outside Ghana to tell us how to control it. If it's excess expenditure of our revenue, we have to know where to cut to ensure that our expenditure is aligned with our income. And so mostly, I think that we should sit down and we have the brains, we have the men to be able to look at the possible solutions to some of the problems that we are having. So the Chamber of Commerce is in support of that. What I would want to add is that we should go beyond coming out with these policies recommendation. We should look at how we can implement those policies and recommendations that will come out of this. But this is not the first time we are having it. We had a century consensus, and we came out with brilliant ideas. We couldn't implement them to the latter, and now we are back to it. If you look at some of the documents like Private Sector Development Strategy 1 and 2, and all the development strategies that we have had, in fact, if you had implemented them, I think that most of the challenges that we are having now would have been a thing of the past. So I strongly believe that we need this to develop these homegrown policies and then go beyond that to make sure that we implement them. It shouldn't be one of the things that will end up in our textbooks. And then next 4 years, 2 years, we come back to come and say the same thing. I also would want to advise that we need to do proper monitoring and evaluation. All the things that we have said we are going to do, can we in a year look at what we have done, the challenges that we have had? If we have to go forward, what is it that we have to do? So it should be key performance indicators to assess the performance of this economy. So Ghana National Chamber of Commerce, we support it truly. My president was there to also offer his support and also support the issue of the private sector discussion. So I think that is good. We have spent 2/3 of our years after independence always going to IMF, and we still are facing these challenges. About 40-something% or 40-something years of our 69 years after independence, we've all been in IMF 17 times. I think it's about time we put a stop to it to develop local solutions to our problems.
Okay, I'm sure then that just as the president of the Ghana Union of Traders Associations, Dr. Joseph Obeng, said that this would also put in place guidelines to hold government to account by. I'm sure that when that time arises, you also as industry would ensure that you put pressure on government to stick to the agreements in these the outcomes of the National Economic Dialogue. But then to the main topic for today, budget presentation, 11th of March. What are your key expectations? I'm sure scrapping of taxes is number one on it, or is there anything else?
No, you see, the good thing with this budget is that now we know the state of the economy. In the SONA, in the State of the Nation address, the president gave us the state of the nation, including the economy. Today, we had the state of the economy, and we know that the economy is bleak. We know that it's fragile. We know that indeed the economy had not turned the corner. So now that we know the state, what is it that we have to do to make sure that you move forward, to make sure that we have a very sustainable development going forward? For businesses, we know development is not only for government. The government will set the environment, and the private sector will take advantage of whatever the policies, recommendations the government has put in place. So for us, whatever we are asking for, knowing the current state, and then knowing the state of the private sector, which operates within the larger economy, it means that there should be some policies that will stimulate private sector activity. Of course, we've made mention of the taxes, which we know, and the discussion we have had over the last month, we know that some of them will be taken away. One thing that we also want to see is that the Ministry of Finance, the fiscal sector, should work closely with the monetary sector. We don't want a situation where the Ministry of Finance is doing something and the central bank is also doing something, and they are not coordinating. Most of the challenges we've had with inflation is because there's fiscal dominance, where the Ministry of Finance think that they can put on taxes, they can put on levies, and expect that prices will be the same. For businesses, once you impose taxes, once you impose these levies, once you increase the cost of production, they will pass on a proportion of this cost to consumers, and inflation will go up. The central bank is supposed to control inflation. is supposed to ensure that there's price stability. So if it's not working in tandem with what the Ministry of Finance is doing, obviously you are going to face some of these challenges. So I expected that there should be a complementary role between the monetary sector and the fiscal sector. Another thing I also would want to see is how they are going to stabilize the exchange rate. It's been one of the difficulties we've had as a country over the years. We do well for a certain period of time, and then by our own activities, by our own action, we go back to see the cedi depreciating. At least we have seen some stability. The question we want to ask is that, is it sustainable? We would want to see a sustainable stability into the future. So as a business, if we are planning, then we know that within the next 6 months, the cedi is $1 is to this, and then we can plan. We don't want this Palogo kind of cedi that we are having. Today is like this, tomorrow is like this. I would want to see the kind of coordination between the Ministry of Finance and also the central bank to ensure that we have the stability that we need as a country. But I also think that we should look largely at our expenditure. The issue with us is not necessarily with revenue. In fact, if you raise the revenue to GDP 20% and you don't control our expenditure, we will come back and be saying the same thing, that we need to raise our tax revenue. Meanwhile, we have no control at our expenditure. So much as you are looking for revenue, for which IMF and all development partners, they've asked that we should introduce taxes, we should do this. These taxes, most of them are nuisance taxes. They are not helping businesses in any way. So I would want to see that even though we have a very constrained fiscal space, how do we operate that we reduce expenditure so the little revenue that we'll be able to get, we are able to take care of our expenditure rather than having expenditure.
Okay, so that was Mark Bedua-Boadjeh from the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, basically sharing key expectations from this year's budget. We've heard him talking about a balance between monetary policy and fiscal policy. I'm sure by extension also ensuring that the economy is stable enough for us to have low interest rates. We have the issue of the stability of the local currency, checking our expenditure so that we do not have to go overboard. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll bring you more on this budget expectations. Stay with us.
At ShopRite, we are committed to bringing you lower prices every day. That's why we've kept the price of our in-store bread at a low 17 cedis, 99 pence worth, and we will keep it there. Plus, get great deals like 340-gram Lebanon chicken sausage, only 19 cedis.
Welcome back. This is Business Focus here on TV3. We're continuing for where we left off the conversation on budget expectations. We had Mark Bedua-Boadjeh on the line sharing his key expectations on the budget. Mark, you were making some points there, but then I just wanted to find out from you. You had earlier stated that you understand now from the presentation that was done today that, okay, we've lost Mark. But then we have spoken to other industry players also on their expectations of this year's budget presentation. And this is what they basically have to say. For a lot of them, the key taxes that were mentioned should be scrapped. No taxes also should be introduced on petroleum products. So let's listen to them. tell us, for you as AGI, what are your key expectations of the budget presentation? We know it's happening next week.
Yeah.
What are the key line items you'll be looking out for?
We're looking for tax reforms, as indicated, the VAT reforms. We know they will have a concern of the magnitude in terms of the impact that the total reforms will have on the domestic revenue. However, they should come clearly and communicate with us. Some taxes must be scrapped as promised, like the emission tax and the other associated nuisance taxes should be scrapped. The big elephant in the room is the reforms on the VAT, because the VAT have a cascading baseline that doubles the tax you pay before the value and the levy component. They should tell us what exactly they can do in the first stage and in the second stage, and we go along with them. We know they need the revenue to balance the books and the commitment to IMF, and therefore our expectation is that they might not do 100% at a go, but let them communicate with us, take off the cascading effect, and then let's take off the total figure of total input, total output, and take off the levies and the other nuisance one. So our highest expectation in this particular budget is the tax reforms.
We've seen interest rates begin to drop. Good sign or too early to call?
It's too early to call. They need to demonstrate the sustainability of that. It has an element of the exchange rate and the formula, the non-performing loans. There are many factors underpinning the computation of the policy rate. Too early to call.
All right, let's talk about budget expectations. For you as Guta, what do you have your eyes on?
We want all the nuisance taxes to be scrapped. As we've said, that taxes should be simplified and be affordable. And especially with the VAT, the structure is not good at all, and it doesn't ensure compliance. So these are the areas that we've been talking about. The exchange rate, also, whatever means that the regulatory reforms that we have to bring to ensure that we have a stable exchange rate regime will also help the cost of businesses.
But we've seen that at least government is doing something to reduce interest rates on the T-bills. At least that's some sign of good things to come. Or what do you say?
So it is good, but sustainability is what we all seek, that we will be able to sustain it. Because sometimes the pressure that comes to bear to governance make governments depart from their intended purposes. So the intention is good. They have started earlier. How are they going to sustain it? Because it's good for us. It's sending right signals for businesses. And these are because as a leader, you have to send the right signals, and that's what we call positive speculation. And that if you the hope that is inspiring on Ghanaian businesses is going to inspire positive speculation that is going to help stabilize the economy. So everything that they've started now creates the hope for us.
So that's basically industry rehashing the fact that they want all nuisance taxes scrapped, COVID-19 e-levy and the likes removed as the government promised, in order to free up some space for them to be able to do their business and make progress. On that note, that'll be all for today's edition of Business Focus here on TV3. For more business stories, please visit our website. It's 3news.com/business. Later tonight at 7 p.m. on News 360, we'll bring you more business updates. I am Michael Obudu. Thank you for watching. As always, please stay safe and catch you next week.